everyone. Welcome back to another podcast where we interview leaders in the energy space here on Flipping the Barrel to uncover more about their career and life journeys. And once again, today we are at the Collide and Digital Wildcatter studio. Brand new studio, beautiful studio. We are so happy to be here. So happy for them to let us be back in person. And I am so excited to have Kim Padeletti here today. She is the head of Energy Data Insights at AWS. And for short, they're pioneering the resource exploration with generative AI and cloud technology, which sounds like a really big words. Kim is an incredible leader. She has an awesome story growing up from Mississippi. Really excited for all of our listeners to learn more about you and what you have done in the places you have traveled in the world too. You are like world traveler, which I thought was really amazing when I met you and got to just hear about all of the time that you spent in the field as well. So Kim, I really want people to understand first what y'all are doing at AWS, because I think it's really cool. And that title is something we've never had on the podcast.
Excellent. Well, yes, thank you so much for having me. First of all, this is really exciting to dive deeper into what you guys are doing with Flipping the Barrel. So a little bit about Energy Data Insights, and I know that sounds very broad when you talk about energy and data and generative AI and cloud. But really in basic terms, we help our customers, operator customers, but could also be partners, service companies, software vendors, help use our cloud infrastructure, our cloud technology to find previously invisible insights in their data or new insights to help understand resource exploration better, to maybe help drill a well faster, or to uncover something that is adding value to their company. So we mostly focus in subsurface data, the beginning of the value chain, upstream data, wells, production, because that drives better decisions further down the energy value chain. And we really help our customers understand their data better so that they could start to use these new technologies with generative AI and advanced technologies like high performance compute, so they can understand these big petabytes of data sets that they've got in their portfolio and make a better decision much faster than they could have ever done before. So it's a very exciting time, but it is a very daunting task. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun to play in generative AI and play in all these new technologies and really help our customers solve these big pain points and problems.
That's awesome.
That is super cool. I want to just honestly dive more into the tech talk and understand a little bit more about that. But today is about your career journey.
Yes.
I think we should definitely do a separate section because I have a million questions right now. But kind of back onto the career journey and podcast section. Jamie mentioned you grew up in a small little town in Mississippi, and your parents are actually still there today, and that's where family is. Your dad worked in physics. Your mom was an artist. She was an artist, studied an art major. What was that like? Because I could just think about just the complete differences between both of them, like very artsy, super engineer, very probably, everything needs to make sense. How did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your childhood, but also you picked chemical engineering. So you obviously followed dad's footsteps. How did that come all into play into making that kind of decision?
Oh, great question. Yes, I think at first glance, you could tell that I grew up in a place where there's two ends of the spectrum, high creativity and innovation and art projects. And my mom had like an art studio. And so like all my school projects I did in there, but my dad was like, very logical, very rational, very analytical, very academic. And so it was kind of fun because those collaborations like really, I guess I'd use the word collide, they sort of collided to make me who I am today. And I think that's what I love about, working at a place like Amazon, because we get to do innovative stuff that, is seemingly creative, very innovative, and solving a problem in a creative way. But we're using data and we're using logic and we're using rational thinking to do those things. And so it's really fun in my job to actually apply those two ends of the spectrum. For me, I'd say like a pivotal point of like where I knew I wanted to do engineering was really around when I was probably second grade, about eight years old. I did, the science fair. You guys might have done that growing up, or obviously a lot of people had participated in that. And I did a science project that I didn't know at the time would end up kind of becoming the mantra for my life.
Really?
And I'll tell you a little bit how I ended up there. But the science fair project was called Rainbow Temperatures. And so my dad brought home like a prism, just like a normal prism. And he was like, hey, like, I'll help you do the science fair project. I have this idea that you could split light, and I want you to guess, like, you know, all the colors on the rainbow, like red to purple, like which one would be hot and which one would be cold. We're going to take a thermometer and measure those things. Wow. And at first when I was thinking about it, I was like, that doesn't make sense because there's like no data on the temperature. And, you know, in second grade, you're just forming a hypothesis. So you put the thermometer down, and clearly, obviously, like, the reds were hotter, the blues were cooler. And, you know, you do this little hypothesis. And my mom was like, oh, this is great. This is going to be an art project. And she
heard color, and she's like, I'm in.
Color and art project and cool. And my dad's like, data, and we measure it at each temperature, like very analytical. And that was sort of when I realized that you didn't have to sacrifice being fun and creative and art with data and engineering and logic. And so, the thing that really was interesting to me about that project is it revealed what became my mantra today, which is we used data and things that to the naked eye were not obvious to measure what was previously invisible. And so it's really a mantra I bring to my work today with subsurface data. I say that I make the previously invisible visible for our customers. And that's the thing I love about the energy side, is because, you know, you've got buried hidden reservoirs, you've got energy sources that are constantly changing and dynamic. And that moment really sparked me into being who I am today with doing chemical engineering and moving into the energy industries, making that previously invisible visible, but using data to do that.
That's really cool.
And at 8 years old too.
Yeah, like in second grade.
At 8, I didn't know that, but I look back on it now and I'm like,
you connect the dots.
You know, that really excited me to kind of put data to something that wasn't visible.
That is so
and
cool.
It excites me today to kind of put data to things that might be a new discovery, or, you know, use data to find a new tieback or a well that you didn't know about before. Maybe it was overlooked in the 70s with old seismic, and now you can use data to find those things. So it's like a little treasure hunt.
Yeah. And specifically chemical engineering. Why chemical engineering and not physics like your dad, or I don't know, something else? What made you choose that specifically?
Well, that's a great question. I knew I liked math and science. I knew I liked chemistry. I did want to have something that was a little bit more I like the economic element behind it, because there's a lot of academic stuff you can do in pure play physics or chemistry, but I like that engineering was like, okay, you do a project, is it economic or not? Yes or no, make that decision. And I like the velocity and the movement. And same in energy. I like the dynamic nature of making these decisions on projects. Are they economic or not? Because there are a lot of things in our industry that might be wonderful plays, but they're not economic right now, and or they might not be at the time, and that puts a unique edge to having the engineering side.
I remember when we spoke, I thought it was so interesting when you told me that you went to a boarding school, because usually we hear that sometimes with some of the people that come on the podcast, but it sounded like that was something that kind of also, when it comes to STEM, like it was a STEM boarding school as well. So you're able to really like hone in on those things that you thought were, or that you were good at, and that your parents, obviously your dad was good at. And there's two things to that. There was that I thought was very interesting. And then you talked to me about this like one way and two door decision making. And I can't remember if you found that while you were in boarding school, but I'd love for you to talk to us about like what you thought, like how both of those impacted you, and then how you still use that decision making today. Because I really liked it when we spoke. I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah. So when I was about 15 years old, there's a school in Mississippi. It's still there today. It's called the Mississippi School for Mathematics and Science. It's a public school. You just have to test to get in, or, you know, they look at your grades and you write an essay. And it's the last 2 years of school, so your junior and senior year. And so I was 15, and I got this really cool, glossy brochure from them. And it had the Robert Frost poem about, you know, the two paths diverge in the wood. And I took the one less traveled, and that's made all the difference. And I was like, that is like me, you know, I want to take that path least traveled. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was probably one of my first major life two-way door decisions, because I was talking to one of my good friends was going, and her sister had gone, and they were helping to influence me. And she said, hey, look, you can always go, and if you hate it and you really don't like it, you could come back to our regular high school. But if you don't go, then you never get that chance. You close that door, essentially. And so I was like, I think that's a really good way to think about it. And now at work, one of Amazon's philosophies is one-way door decisions and two-way door decisions. And two-way door decisions are things that, you know, they're pretty much reversible, or they would take a quick time to reverse, or you have optionality. You don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about those. You can do high velocity decision making. One-way doors are things that it would be very hard to reverse. Maybe not impossible, but very hard.
Like you're closing the door,
Yeah.
and there's no other one to go into.
Exactly. And you want to spend more time and really get data behind those decisions and think very deeply about them before you make them. And so I didn't know it then, but that was probably like my first deep life kind of one-way door and two-way door decision. It turned out to be a great decision, and I had a really wonderful experience, and it was amazing school. And the reason it was because I was put with people that were just, I went from being, you know, a pretty smart kid in a small town school that was pretty competitive to being like, you know, with kids that were going to MIT and Mensa members.
Yeah.
And they just had this like love for learning. And it became like the kids that were cool were, you know, staying up late, ordering pizza, doing physics projects. And so the value of like kids and learning, the emphasis was just so different. And it was great to be in that environment where it was like, oh, these are my people. They get me. They're very also, you know, nerdy, fun, love to learn, love to solve problems. And so it was a really great experience, but it was also very humbling, because you go from being the top 2, 3 in your school to being like
just one, in a sea of amazing people.
Yes. And so it was also a very humbling experience, but also good to kind of like going to college early, because you're on your own in a dorm, but very fun.
Yeah.
I think something that was interesting, and kind of something we always talk about, networking and just asking. You never know when you ask. And when you were looking for your first internship, your mom literally asked a NASA, I guess, representative, or like somebody working at NASA about their internship program, and you were able to get it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, because that's amazing.
That is kind of a funny story. I had done jobs before, you know. I think I volunteered at different places, and trying to, like every high schooler, build up some experience so that you could get a job that pays money. And I totally had it in my mindset that I was like, if I got a job at McDonald's, that's great, because it pays money.
Yeah.
You know? And so I would have been happy with that at 18. But my mom was a teacher and teaching art. And one day they took the teachers to NASA, Stennis Space Center in Mississippi, like as an educational tour. And she happened to see an office that said HR, and like walked in during the tour and was like, you know, hey, you know, I have a daughter. She goes to a math and science school, and, you know, she loves this type of stuff. Do you by chance like hire interns or anything? And they were like, well, yes, we absolutely do. And they like pulled out a paper application and gave it to her, like, have her apply and see where it goes. So like classic mom move.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think in high school, I was like mortified that she did that. But looking back on it now, I realize that advocacy is not really being selfish or anything like that. It's really like, if you want opportunities, you really have to, like in her case, she physically, literally knocked on a door. Yes. Like you have to go knock on doors yourself to go get those things that you want.
Yeah.
And so that was a really interesting lesson to me that I didn't get at the time. But I applied for it. And a lot of that volunteer experience that I had, even though it was unpaid, helped to be able to get a working internship like that and get my foot in the door. And then, of course, like, doing the work with math and science and classes helped, because they were looking for that too. So it was a big lesson for me that, like, I was shocked when I got accepted, but it is a really cool way to think that you need to ask for those opportunities and advocate for yourself to go after them.
Yeah, I love the classic mom move. It's so true. It's like always advocating for your daughters and sons. You're like, oh, let me go and ask.
Yeah.
After you graduated with your degree, you went to go work for Oxy. Tell us about How did you get the interview with Oxy? What was that like? And then when you went and started in the field, like what was your first experience? And like, what did you think about oil and gas? I mean, I know you did the internship at NASA and you did some other stuff, but did you have any perceptions of the oil and gas industry before working at Oxy?
Yeah, so I had spent a lot of internships with NASA, Navoshino, and other places, and I learned a ton. I loved it, but I realized that I think I wanted to work in an industry that was more dynamic, that was moving fast, that was international, had a bigger global footprint, and was doing stuff that was constantly changing and was involved in everything, as you guys have highlighted on the podcast. So I looked at pharmaceuticals because that also would have been similar. And graduating chemical engineering, there were opportunities in the chemicals industry. There was opportunities in pharmaceuticals, lots of different heavy industries. And energy was always just interesting to me. I applied to a lot of energy roles. And one of the things that I was looking for in any of the jobs across all industries was a rotational program. That really appealed to me, something that maybe it's you got into the field or you got into a plant, but you got to see different parts of the operations. Maybe you got to see, reservoir or drilling, or in pharmaceuticals, it would have been like the plant, R&D, operations, marketing. I was really, really drawn to that because I felt pretty firmly that I needed some kind of diverse foundation before starting my career and just being like just a facilities engineer or just a plant engineer or just a marketing professional. So Oxy had a really amazing rotational program in Bakersfield in California where you got to rotate through all different parts of the field, like facilities, reservoir, drilling, operations, workovers, completions, and like learn the whole life cycle of energy. And I thought that was really unique. And so I accepted it. And it was also kind of another two-way door decision because I could have gone through that rotational program and really said, you know what, drilling is really for me. I want to go do that. Or facilities is really for me. I want to do that. And so it made a big difference in feeling comfortable with the whole life cycle because you don't go that deep in college as you would in the field.
What was your perception when you went to Bakersfield? Because it's not, when you think of California, it's not like, the beach and the beautiful sand. Like it's pretty dry and it's all rigs. So, or like pumping jacks too. So
it is a big energy hub. I was coming from a small town in Mississippi, so anything in California to me was just amazing. And it was close to a lot of really cool places like LA and San Francisco. You could go on the weekend and go to the beach. But, when you're at work in the field, like it's pretty full on. I was up really early on the rigs, especially when I was doing my drilling rotation. I mean, I would be there like, drilling started, the daily drilling reports were at 6 a.m. I was there early. But it was also really, it was a really deep experience. Like, I can't imagine had I started my career in the office, I wouldn't even really know what a big separator looks like or a pump or any of the technology that I would have been having to understand the data behind. And so it gave me a much deeper perspective that I wouldn't have gotten by
just jumping into like an office role.
But yeah, so it was a great experience because it had so much diversity in that field, like so many different types of reservoirs and the, secondary recovery, tertiary recovery. So you got a pretty big exposure for that type of a field. And so from a work perspective, it was very fulfilling, even though it wasn't as exciting of a place. It is a lot of rigs. It is a lot of stuff, but because there were a lot of rigs and a lot of activity, it was a really cool foundation to get to learn every part of the field.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about going from Bakersfield to, I believe, Oman. Right, you went from there to there. Was it with Oxy? Okay. I believe you had some misconceptions. Not you, but people just in general tell you like, "Are you sure you want to go to the Middle East?" We've all been warned. Even on the trip last year, etc. But it's people who probably have never lived and worked there and like actually had experiences. It's just more us, maybe from the Western side, thinking a certain way. But when you went there, you actually like felt like it was a complete opposite and you kind of wanted to shine a light on that. Can you tell us a little bit about just the differences of what it was like working there and, what you did while you were there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So after I did the rotational program and had moved back into doing some projects and operational work in the asset there, there was an opportunity to have people move overseas for a big project in Oman. It was the Makaizana project. It was a big steam flood, and there were some similarities to the project that I had worked on. And my first thought, of course, was just like, oh, I'm a 23-year-old engineer. There's no way they're going to pick me for this international project. But I knew that I wanted to go international. I knew I wanted to do it maybe early in my career when I had some ability to just pack up a suitcase and move in the next couple of weeks when they asked. And so I also advocated, and I said, doing an international assignment is something that I'm interested in, and told people about it. And I think the more people that you told about it, and they were like, well, you know what? Maybe we can try this out and see if they could work on this project in Oman. And so I think when the chance came, I just raised my hand and said, yeah, I'll do it. And I'll figure it out when I'm there.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful experience. Oman is a really beautiful place and amazing people. The project was really dynamic. I mean, we were growing very quickly in this aggressive steam flood project. And so I learned a ton there too. But really, that was my first exposure of working and living in a place that, different than the rotational field program where I was learning a lot technically, I started to get a global perspective of how you do business in Oman or how you do business in the Middle East isn't the same way that we do business here. It's just different. You just have to understand a little bit more. And so having that cultural perspective and exposure early in my career was a really big eye-opener, and something that I hadn't really considered before as being part of an early career program. But I think it added a lot. It added a lot of value for me, and the projects were just massive, very, very much bigger than a lot of the smaller ones you'd see maybe in shale or in the U.S. So that was also great to see the scale of like the mechanical vapor compressors and everything are just like huge. And so the fields are very big too. So from a technical standpoint, and then also from a cultural and personal standpoint, it was a really deeply enriching experience, and just great to meet other people and see how they work and live, and try their food, try their cuisine, understand their holidays and their traditions. And it was a really rewarding, fun experience.
You talk about these roles that you've been on, and I just remember in your story, you went to Oman and you spent some time in Milan to Italy, and you took on a big project there. And as women, I feel that a lot of times we're not advocating for ourselves. You kind of mentioned a little bit already, like you rose your hand, you said, I want to go into international space, or I'm open to that. What advice do you give to those who maybe aren't as like forthcoming, or like, hey, I want to do this? Like, how do you get over that mindset, or that scarcity mindset of like, maybe I won't be chosen, or like, if I work really hard and put my head down, somebody will select me? Because those aren't the people that usually get the opportunity. So what kind of advice would you give for others that are listening today?
That's hard. And I've had so many times in my career where I thought that too. We all fall into our own, what I call inner critic.
Yeah.
And we say like, oh, well, like if I'm not good enough to take that international job, or I don't meet like all, 20 out of 20 requirements for that job, I just won't apply. And so I think you have to get over that fear, because you won't ever really get what you want out of your life if you don't. And so, I think if you feel hesitant to do it yourself, or if you just think, if I stay in my lane and I do my job really well, someone's going to notice you. No, you might get lucky, and they may, but they're probably not going to know what's in your head about wanting to move international or wanting to take another role unless you advocate for yourself. But of course, there's so many ways you can do that. I mean, you can use your boss or your management team, maybe your HR department, to indicate like moving preferences or career desires, or even people in the industry, to see how their pathway was. Or I'm sure you've had some stories on your podcast of people who moved internationally or advocated for a senior role, or, listen to their advice of how they got it, and see how it works for your own personal voice. A lot of people, they want to use their manager to help advocate. Some people want to do it themselves. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately your life. And if you want to have that kind of level 10 life or level 10 career, like high impact career that you want, if you just feel comfortable not advocating for yourself, you're just going to stay at kind of a 2 or a 3 or a 4 in your life. And you'll leave that on the table and say, I think you get to a point where you're like, you know what, this is silly. I'm going to advocate for myself to get this better role or move international or do the thing that I really desire to do. And so I think it's just finding your strategy to do that.
No, I love that you mentioned that, because yes, we've had so many folks on here as well that and we tell people too, it's like you're the CEO of your career and of your life. And if you're not asking for the things that you want, you could be the best employee, the hardest working person in the room. Not that you're not going to go unnoticed, but there's so many other people raising up their hands and being a little bit more straightforward on the opportunities that they want. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's a huge piece of advice for everybody out there. Another question we had for you was, obviously after Oxy, I believe you went to BHP, and then from BHP, you got into AWS. Tell us a little bit about that transition going from operator to a super awesome company like Amazon. How did you make yourself stand out to a tech company when they're recruiting specifically from the industry, where maybe they don't want somebody, I don't know, I'm just speaking like super, like, this is how we do one thing, versus like, I assume they want somebody that's like thinks big, like kind of fit that culture. Because I would assume AWS and Amazon in general, we always think of like tech very different from the traditional like oil and gas culture that we grew up, like Silicon Valley, Houston, you know, like that kind of thing. Were you able to stand out for them to be like, she's the right fit for our company, but also bringing all this knowledge from an operator?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've gotten this question for a couple people that want to transition from maybe an operator or energy into a tech company, but still doing energy. And for me, I was super fortunate at BHP back around 2017 when people are starting to break into cloud, to start to do some pilots and proofs of concepts with cloud and advanced technologies with tech, innovation, or digital R&D type projects. And so I was starting to dip my toe in the water with that. And when I did those projects, I realized this is going to really disrupt how we do exploration, how we do drilling, how we do production. And I just loved seeing those patterns in the data. And like I said, accessing what I call like the previously invisible insights and things that we didn't see before. And so when the opportunity came about, Amazon had an oil and gas office, and now we've an dedicated energy vertical that they were opening up around late 2018. The office had opened, and they said, look, we're looking for people who've done some of these projects and can bridge the domain expertise and the technology. And that really reframed it in my mind, because for a long time I thought I didn't see a career path to go into AWS because I wasn't a developer. I wasn't doing deep coding. And I realized I should have just reframed my mindset, because really what they were looking for were people that could translate the business problems and the business challenges and the energy domain expertise into the technology. And as you've seen over the years, with the technology becoming more and more automated, and even with generative AI, it's about having people that have the right mindset and can frame the problem correctly, because the coding will become more automated and higher level. So I didn't really need as deep of a computer science degree as I thought I would, to be able to solve those problems. So for people that are looking to break in, maybe they're in a traditional energy field and they want to do more technology, raise your hand for those cloud projects, raise your hand for those technology projects, for those AI projects in your own company, build that foundation, and then you can really bridge the expertise that you had in an operator with like a cloud company or a tech company. And there's so much online. I mean, there's so many, we offer free coding classes, free skills classes, certifications.
Oh, that's cool.
Do that in your spare time or on the weekends to kind of build up that foundation and, put those things on your resume so that you can differentiate yourselves amongst and not just seem like a traditional energy expert. So.
How do you think relationships and mentors had, impacted your career? Because even when you think about your transition from like Oxy, BHP, and then AWS, and even the advice that you just gave, it's kind of also like, well, I don't know anybody though that, is doing that. So how do I meet somebody? And if I want to go into AI or do something technology driven that's not at an operator and I'm working for an operator and I apply online, that doesn't always work. So what has worked, what has been successful in bridging that gap and like building those relationships with people?
That's a great question. Yeah. Mentorship and sponsorship, and maybe even the networking aspect of it. If you are trying to get into a company and you don't know somebody, I get questions all the time of like, people want to know, how would you pivot? But if they ask a really deep, insightful question, and that helps them stand out. And for other people, if you look at your network and you try to find those people, maybe you could say, hey, could you give me I'm doing an interview with AWS, and people will ask me, could you give me some advice or things like that? I'll be like, hey, check out this blog. Like, our recruiting team gave advice on like how to answer questions.
Oh, wow.
And or check out some information of other people who've had different experiences moving from a traditional industry or heavy industry into tech. There's so much information online. I'd also encourage people, like, you can find a mentor and a sponsor, but be ready and have done your research and your due diligence and your preparation about that company before you go ask them questions.
Yes.
So like, that person will be like, oh, she's really done a lot of due diligence about this company, and she seems like she's really interested and she wants to join AWS. And then they can become a sponsor for you, because they would be able to advocate and say, this is someone that I think would add value to the company.
I think it's important to, even on the recruiting end, when they come to the booth and they're like, what do you do? And it's just so different when somebody has like that research done and they just seem eager and put a little bit of time versus just making you do all the work and just telling them everything about AWS. I love that. To close, I think this is a super interesting question on just everything that you're doing with AWS and Gen AI, and really pushing this industry to think outside the box, to see the world from, with a different set of glasses. We've been in it for 12 years and we could still see today the old schoolness that is like, we're trying to push it past and like, let's use technology and let's use AI. But you probably deal with a lot of pushback even on just the word AI. I hear people still very much push back on it in the industry. So how do you deal with trying to progress, but also bring people along where they don't feel like they're being replaced, or they feel like this, how do you deal with that? Because you're on the forefront. You guys are bringing the industry along. You're moving tech. You're really making people think outside the box. But you probably get a lot of pushback from traditional oil field. They're like, we've been doing this forever. Why do we need this?
Yeah, I think the one thing that was unexpected for me, even when I started doing cloud-based pilots and things like that in 2017, was I thought the technology was going to be really hard to solve these problems. Like, that was going to be the biggest challenge of my job. But I quickly realized that it was the hearts and minds and the people part that was the more challenging thing, and getting people to pick it up and use it and adopt it. And one thing that I have learned in my career, especially when it comes to technology and trying to get adoption and change people's things, is you really can't go into them with the data and spreadsheets and be like, well, look, here's all the data. This is why it works. Like that's a very defensive move, even though the data might be right and true. One contrarian way I found to get people on board with this change that might be counterintuitive is storytelling. And so there's a book that's called The Leader's Guide to Storytelling by Stephen Denning. And he's a former executive consultant. He worked at the World Bank, and he actually tells stories in there about how he got the World Bank to buy into these big, massive, multi-billion-dollar projects to enact real change and impact. And I read that book in 2017 when I started doing cloud projects, and I was like, I've been doing it all wrong. I've been going into these meetings and just showing people the data, and I'm like, this is why the well would be wrong. Here's all the data. And it's like, that starts off on the wrong foot. And when you start out with stories about, maybe it's a human in the lead AI story, and how this one asset changed the way that they were interpreting a well, and that gets people's head wrapped around it. It was like, oh, if they can do it, we can do it too. Or people start to champion using AI or using the cloud, and you take those success stories and you share them, and you change the mindset, and you really reframe how you look at it horizontally to enact that change. And so the biggest question that I get from most executives in upstream and subsurface technology is the cultural and the people and the change management question. How do you get adoption? How do I roll this out to a team and get them to use it? How do I do that? And so because I kept getting so many questions, I started writing a blog series about how to do change management for subsurface technology and innovation. Wow. And it ends up, it's mostly all about people. And so just because I got the question so much, I was like, I think everybody needs to hear this and what I've experienced. And it's not about you forcing the technology on people. That never works.
Yeah.
But it's also not about just saying, hey, give the subsurface person everything they want, because of course the IT and the technology people have to understand how to scale it across your enterprise or across your organization. It's really about the two domains working together to enact a change. And I think the best tool that I've seen for that change is telling those stories and telling those success stories. And that's the one piece of advice I give people trying to enact a big change in a company.
That's awesome. I think it's just so amazing, the stuff that you're doing, Kim. And I thought that was, even when we first met, and then just knowing what y'all are doing at AWS and how it like impacts the oil and gas industry in such a positive way. And you yourself, your journey of getting in from the very beginning, working in the field, working for Oxy, working for operators, to then finding yourself now helping out operators. I think it's just such a cool transition throughout your career life so far. And we're just so excited to continue to watch you and see where you go to next and see what's going to happen next. But thank you so much for coming here today and talking to us about not just your journey, but also the super cool stuff about AI. I know this one, we might have like focused a little bit more on what AI is and stuff, but I think it's so cool for our listeners to like know that there's potential opportunity out there. And like you yourself went from an operator to this tech space. And and that's just going to continue. And it's continued to grow in that space for opportunity for everybody in our community and the listeners. So thank you so much, Kim, for coming today and sharing your journey with us.
Absolutely. I think it's probably one of the most exciting times, if not the most exciting time, with all of these really cool tools and technology and AI, generative AI, especially that you have access to. So, I mean, there's things that people in their early career are going to do that are completely unimaginable with energy that we can't even wrap our head around today. And that's really exciting. So, and I encourage everybody to lean into that and use it as much as they possibly can. And share those stories when you're successful about it.
Please, yes. Share your stories.
My mantra, like I've said, it's making the previously invisible visible. Do that in your company. Share those stories. Use AI to do that. And, I tell people your data is more valuable than you think. It's a treasure trove of things that you can do to solve these big energy problems. So.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Kim. And thank you for listening to this podcast. If you like it, please leave us a comment. We love to hear from our listeners. You can find us Flipping the Barrel on LinkedIn, Instagram, and www.flippingthebarrel.com on the website. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.